Okay, so I am here with Prez Wells. We are going to talk a little bit about Blewbury, of course, and Prez's role in the Blewbury Players. But Prez is a figure who is well known in the village and has been involved for many, many years. I'm sure he won't mind me saying. So welcome, Prez. Thanks for agreeing to talk to me. I suppose maybe before we get started, maybe you could tell us a little bit about the Barn Theatre in Didcot, because I understand that's where you met Ron Freeborn.
Yes, that's quite true. Well, the Barn Theatre in Didcot was in an ex-YMCA building just after the war, and it was run by a chap called Bill Brind, and it produced something like 6 or 7 shows a year. It's full-time, and I'm just trying to think what the first thing we did was. Well, there was a pantomime on called Cinderella, and my wife was at rehearsals for this. She was rehearsing to play Cinderella. And I popped in one day to sort of see how the rehearsal was going, and a chap was missing off the cast who hadn't turned up, and Bill Brind asked me, do you mind going standing in? So I went up on stage and read the part, and after I finished he said, have you thought about doing this seriously? And I said, no, not really. He said, well, I think you should. And then he sort of recruited me into the Barn Theatre, and that's where I met Ron, who was doing all the scenery, design and acting as well, I believe. I can't remember much about his acting. But
So roughly when would this have been, Prez? What year?
This would have been in early 70s.
Early 70s.
I think, well, Players started in 76, so it was all over by then. It was finished probably 72 or something like that, 73. And then Ron moved to Blewbury. So I naturally kept in touch with him because we were great mates. And then we both bumped into Peter Saunders. Peter Saunders had been involved with the Stockwell Players, and they had just closed. So he was there at Orchard Dean, and he put on a couple of shows because he was that minded. And we did a music hall in the barn, which was in his grounds, which is now a house, actually, just as you go in the gate on the right. And we did a play called Maria Martin, or Murder in the Red Barn. I played the murderer, you see. And believe it or not, Maria Martin was Coral Richards. Long, long time ago.
Ironically, of course, it was her son who ended up converting the barn into a house.
Yes, exactly, yes, that's right. And so with that, Peter's idea was to convert the garden into a theatre which the Stockwell Players had closed. And that's where it started, 1976. Fantastic year for weather.
Of course, it was that hot summer, wasn't it?
It was beautiful summer, long hot evenings, absolutely perfect for open-air theatre. And that's where we got off the ground.
Well, it's a good year to get started,
And the first play, I think, was Mary Wives of Windsor, and I played the French professor or Dr. Cress, and Ron played my servant. And the most embarrassing moment was when I had to kiss him. But then went on, life rolled on and play after play.
And you've been a trustee. You were a trustee for a long time, weren't you?
Yes, the original trustees, Ron was an original trustee. I think the chap, whose name was it? I keep thinking about, it was, dear, sorry. I can't remember his name. Yeah, this guy was an ex-professional, and he'd come from Stockwell Players, and he was then made a trustee of the Blewbury Players to start the game going.
Wasn't Richard Curtis?
Robin was his name.
Robin Sewell,
yeah. And he was a founding trustee of the Blewbury Players. I took over from him in 83, I think it was, 30 years this year.
Yeah, wow.
And he retired. I stepped in and had a very happy with the Players from then on. I have had all my life, Seems like it's been absolutely wonderful.
It's been great, isn't it? And I suppose it's lovely the way that the Players have reinvented themselves with more and more people coming in.
That's my big point. I was saying to Sheila the other day, that's the one thing I appreciate. I used to be able to go into the Players. I knew everybody, backstage, everything, lighting, all the rest of it. I knew every soul. I go now, and I don't know 2/3 of them, and I think that's great.
Yeah,
I think that's the way it's been passed on and built on what's gone. Yeah. So that was it. I did about 30 plays with them.
goodness me.
Difficult to remember. The highlight for me was actually we did plays in the village hall as well, of course.
Yes, of course, yeah.
And my best play, I suppose, was The Death of a Salesman.
Okay.
In,
It's the Arthur Miller, isn't it?
yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that's right. It was an interesting play. You got totally absorbed in it. I know some actors, not you, but some actors sort of seem to be outside the person they were representing. When I was at my best, I used to get totally absorbed into it, to the extent that with Death of a Salesman, for instance, we used to do 2 shows, as you do now, afternoon and evening on a Saturday. I just slept in what was the house until the evening started. I couldn't take myself out of the play and come back in again and start again in the evening, which a lot of people thought was probably silly, but
no, I understand that.
But it totally, you could get totally into the character, and that was my way of doing it.
It's lovely when they do shows like that, when you get the opportunity to properly immerse yourself into a part.
Yeah, no, that was a great show in my memory. It got pretty good reception, and I remember little things like 2 boys who ran the bar in the hall. Every time I came off at the end, there was a glass of scotch in my hand. Nothing. This is not from the cast. This was from the bar people, and I appreciate the little things like that.
So, Praise, you haven't done a show for a number of years now.
Yeah.
What was the last one you did, actually?
I think it was, what did I mention?
Alice. Maybe it was Alice Through the Looking Glass.
Alice Through the Looking Glass. It was, yes, because it was interesting that apart from that early play I did called Murder in the Red Barn, which Coral Richards was in.
Oh yeah.
She also had a small part in this last one.
Ah, okay.
So it was an interesting combination, the first and last sort of thing. So, so that's that one, and I can't remember much about it really. It was not my sort of average sort of typical play. Alice Through the Looking Glass. Can't remember.
Was that done outdoors?
I think I was a king. And yes, and that's right. And yes, that was my last play. But I haven't missed a play.
Yeah.
And I did all the programmes, as you know, right way up to fairly recently. They've done very nicely now, but I did them right the way through the years. As we mentioned earlier, they're in the storage now for anybody who's interested later on.
One of these days, I think we'll sort of scan them and digitise them and put them
that would be the
up
way.
there on the archive. We've got a sort of archive of sorts now in the Red Lion, where pictures of them have been. Pages have been taken out and put along the bar. Yeah. So there's a sort of montage.
Talking about the Red Lion, is that type case still there on the wall?
It certainly is. It's still there. That came from you, did it?
Yeah. All these years.
Did you? So when did that go up there? And did you actually use that back in the day, or was it? It
was used.
Oh wow!
But my company was down in Swindon, and that's where it came from. I can't imagine it was probably been used, although we were from the time I started in print, was, as I say, was very beginnings of offset litho, and was swept through the industry very quickly, and you gave up type setting and all that sort of thing by hand. But that's interesting. But I gave that to the Red Lion many moons ago.
So tell us a bit about the printing business.
It lasted quite a few landlords.
It has, and I think probably over time, some of the little metal type have probably been sort of swindled and ended up in.
Yes, I don't know. I don't know where there are some still.
There's some left.
But,
I can tell you.
I don't know where they came from. I'm sure. But there we go.
No, I think they're still there after all these years, and having been through all those.
It's
landlords.
Amazing, really. Most surprised. Every time there's a change of landlord, I assume they do something with it, but they all left it there.
So how did you get into printing in the first place?
Well, in Didcot, there was an eccentric gentleman who offered me the job of developing the little printers within his premises. And he said, I've got no son and all the rest of it, but so you'll be well looked after and all the rest of it. So, against everybody's advice, I left school for going to uni and took this job. And there's a little company called Expedia and Didcot, and we developed the printers. Once again, we're using offset litho very early, but the rest of the little printing company only employed about 3 people, me and 2 others. And that did quite nicely. We ticked along. Eventually, Mr. Lewis died, and he left me the kit and the barn that it was in. Then at the time there was a company in Swindon called Kilburn Press, and I'd done some typesetting for them, and so I knew a young man there. His name was Wells as well. And they offered me a job, basically, and or to take over my printers and be part of them. So I was a director with Kilburn Press Wallingford, and we moved the kit and went to St Martin Street in Wallingford. After that, what happened next? Well, Trevor, my namesake, sort of thing, he was quite interested in things other than printing. His father had been a printer in Wallingford, and Trevor had looked sideways, looked this way, that, and kept developing other things. He ended up buying shop equipment, for photo setting equipment and all sorts of things in a separate company. And he bought a newsagents in Wallingford, another newsagents, because that's what Kilburn Press started as, and one in Oxford. And he went a little bit too fast, really, and we went bankrupt. At that time, we bought a company down in Swindon, and that was my part of the company. I went down to Swindon, called Swindon Press Limited. It was owned by Kilburn Press, and I was part of that. And when we went bust, it was every man for himself, in the company. And so I looked round for buyers and approached people I knew through the printing industry, Oxford University Press and other places, and also, I don't know how I got in contact, but there was a company in Wales who got interested in buying me. And they came down one day, Rolls-Royce, the chap got out and he just got amused because I got a bit of always had a bit of a kink of me of saying sometimes quite stupid things. And we had a bigger guillotine there, for instance. We were showing him the equipment. He'd walking around a factory in Swindon. And we had a very old guillotine there, you see, which cut reams of paper.
One of those ones which had like a hinge. Was it like that, or?
No, this one didn't. It was electric.
Oh right, okay. So yeah.
But in order to prevent any accident of hands getting under the thing, a great big bar swung out and knocked you out of the way if you were in the way of the knife coming down. You see. And I always remember the joke I said to him, so I'm sure made himself buy the cut property. He said, is that your guillotine? I said, yes. There's only 2 sorts of guillotine operatives here, the quick and the dead, I said, you see. And it tickled his pink, you see. On a serious occasion, because this bar was going to knock your head off if you weren't quick. So I said, yes, only quick and the dead is the only 2 people that can operate that thing. And I'm convinced that it was that sense of humour that he quite liked the idea of buying it. So he bought it and said, if ever you can afford it, you can buy it off of me. Which I did through raising money, loan money, and I did a few years later. Not very well, it was only about over 6 years, I think, at that stage, and I bought it then. And I went on from there till we sold it.
That was definitely, in terms of building up the print business, a real turning point by the sounds of it.
Yeah. It was silly, really. I mean, to leave school that early and take on a sort of fairly ramshackle little effort. But as I say, he was very good to me, this chap. I mean, this is very personal, nothing to do with players or anything else. But because he taught Esperanto, international language, and I did it very well. I thought this. He had an evening class teaching Esperanto, and I joined that because I was interested, and I did so well at it. He sort of sent me to a conference in Switzerland when I was only about 16 or something. On my own, I went, and and you got to Esperanto. It was a marvellous idea. Obviously, spoilt by the communists, because the Russians took it over, thinking they could use it for propaganda worldwide. It was an excellent thing. I mean, you could talk to anybody, Japanese or in this conference in Switzerland I went to in Bern, talk to anybody. It's fairly simply, depending on how well you knew your vocabulary, you could talk to anybody in Esperanto, which is a marvellous thing. That it's unbelievable.
Because I don't know very much about Esperanto. It's funny, like the way you're describing it. I got sent to an Esperanto conference in Switzerland when I was 16. It almost sounds like a Monty Python sketch.
Yeah. We want to make a sketch of it. Yeah.
Well, I think we need to revisit that at some
could
point.
Do that.
But so when you left school at 16, if you don't mind me asking, roughly what year would that have been? Because Esperanto isn't discussed now, is it? I mean, English has become pretty much the global language.
16. Well, I'm 93 now.
Mm-hmm.
So 16 was 46, just after the war.
Wow.
Yeah.
And was Esperanto sort of developed around the war to kind of bring the world together?
I can't remember. A lot of people got put off by the fact that it was becoming very much a communist tool. They could spread propaganda, so it didn't make the grade because of that.
Fascinating.
But it was a interesting thing to do.
Was it rooted in Latin as a language? Because I'm not going to ask you to speak any Esperanto unless you can remember something.
I can't remember it. No, you know more Latin than I know. No, I always fancied learning Latin.
Well, I don't know. I think probably the fact that you left school rather than learn Latin and set up the printing business. It's an inspiring entrepreneurial story, I think, Prez.
Yeah, I suppose it is, but I'll put it down to a lot of luck. The way things went.
When did you end up selling the business?
When did I?
Right, yeah. When
selling?
Did you sell, yeah.
20 years ago.
20 years ago.
Yeah.
So that's a good run. 1946.
Yeah. 20 years ago, 20 odd years ago. 20 odd years ago, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, and sold it to a chap I took on as an apprentice, as a boy, Paul Bradley. We're still in contact. On my 90th birthday, he sent me a card saying, I always think of you as the man who taught me to be nice in business. Amazing, isn't it?
What fun! What a nice little cycle, in the sense that someone inspired you and took a chance on you when you were younger.
Yeah.
Which got you into it in the first place. Then you hand it over to someone in a similar vein who sort of remembers that. It's almost as cyclical as Coral, like your first and your last plays. So.
Yeah. So funny things.
So, Prez, one of the things I wanted to ask you about was the printing work that you've done. And I always think about the Blewbury Festival print that's in the back door by the Red Lion, and then something else that I talked to Ron about previously, which was the self-portrait booklet that was done in the late 60s, sort of depicting the village around that time in the 60s when things were changing. So maybe tell us a bit about the self-portrait book. So this is, I think, the late 60s this was done. So tell us a bit about how that came about.
Right, well, knowing Ron, how he loved to draw and sketches and this sort of thing, he had the idea of producing, first of all, their school magazine at St. Brianus. He was teaching there, and he had the idea of producing a magazine for them, which was totally innovative those days, not letterpress and type, but the beginnings of offset litho. which seems amazing today, doesn't it? The beginnings of offset litho.
Maybe tell us a bit about that for people that don't know printing. So you've got letterpress and offset. Tell us about those different processes and what was different about it.
Well, letterpress printing was, all our lives we knew letterpress printing. Basically, it's set in type, it's inking in the type and press paper against it. And then that's gradually taken over to us, unrecognisable today as an industry, and it's all went to offset litho, and then even on and on into the high-tech world we are today, where you just got to say something almost and it gets printed. But so Ron was aware that I was running a little printers myself at that time with a multi-lith offset litho. He realised that his drawings could be reproduced, and in fact I think Jackie, his wife, used to type the text on a IBM which I lent her, and he would do the paste up, I would do the printing, and that was the way we went. And the school magazine he produced for St Brynas won a national award, and he was always very proud of that. And it was one of the first school magazines not to be letterpress, to be the new this. Other than that, of course, printing was always in my blood because I was a printer, and we used to print all the programs. So I was a bit extravagant with programs. I produced a 21st anniversary program for the Players, which was, I don't know whether you've ever seen it or not.
I think so. I think there's one. There's a good archive, isn't there, that the Blewbury Players have got of them.
Well, I always let Trish. Is it?
Yeah, Trish.
She seems to look after that sort of thing, and I think in the early days I let her have all copies of the things that we had. So there is a good archive of them, and things like that are very memorable. I did one, I think, for the 21st anniversary, coming of age, and then I also did one for 25 years, special magazines, special programs as well, and up until the last few years or so, I've always printed them, and my company went on printing them after I'd sold it.
So that time, the sort of late 60s, early 70s, Ron described it as a really interesting time for the village in terms of change. So sort of having been largely rural village to more sort of creative people moving from London. So you've lived in Long Whitney all these years. So tell me, when did you move to the area first, and what brought you out here?
Bonn.
Yeah,
that was right from Didcot. As I say, the Barn Theatre. Bonn moved to Blewbury. I went to his wedding. I knew him before he was married, and went to his wedding, and he moved out to Blewbury. And as I say, I used to go weekly at least. Sunday lunchtimes was always at the Red Lion for years and years, drinking the same drink and and not making a big do of it, but we were there for an hour and a half, something like that, 2 hours to chat over the week's events and projected events and dream about the next one. And so it was a happy time.
It's always been a bit of a hub of the village, hasn't it, the Red Lion?
Oh, yes, it was. Yes, I mean, I suppose it still is it?
Absolutely, yeah.
I don't get there now. I know Annabelle would trust me because Ron and I used to sing every Christmas, you see, there on Boxing Day.
Of course, so that's when did that? Do you remember when that tradition started? Because that still goes on, the sort of Boxing Day sing-along.
Well, I'm not sure whether we started it or not. I can't think that was that clever, but I think there was always a bit of a happy sing-song. But we used to do...
Because it's a mixture of carols, isn't it? Because it's a mixture of carols and contemporary songs. And, I think, and of course, Ron was involved in the sort of foundation of the Boxing Day walk, wasn't he?
Oh, yes, he did every one. He was. I think he never failed.
Yeah.
I even drove him round once when he was crippled. So he never. Yeah, and I'm just trying to think of the song we used to sing, for goodness sake. Brush up your Shakespeare.
Brush up your Shakespeare.
Start quoting him now. Yeah, that was one. And we had a double act thing where I put my arms between his arms. And he did the speech, and I did the hand movements. And that went down very well. For every year, everyone, Green Eye it was called.
And
the chant would go up in the pub, green eye, green eye, green eye. Oh, all right then. He'd stand on a crate and I'd get my arms behind me and do all things.
And it became a bit of a tradition. You had to do your thing, you know.
Yeah, it was. We had to do it every year. Yeah, it was, and it's probably still being done. I don't know.
Absolutely, it's still done. I mean, I think in terms of the Boxing Day walk, it's very much a Blewbury institution still going strong after all of these years.
Yeah,
and there's still the tradition of kind of these sort of skits and show outside the village hall.
Yeah,
before the walk kicks off, and then there's a sort of tour of the village, of the pubs. Yeah, which of course, when you guys started it in 1970, I think was the first one. There were a few more pubs in the village back then. There were, weren't there? So in addition to the Red Lion, I think there were one or two others.
I do believe there were 11 pubs in Blewbury.
11 pubs.
If you ask the the history people originally, but some of them were just houses, which open for beer sort of thing. But there was 11 pubs in Blewbury, I understand.
Goodness me! Until you drank them all dry, that is, yes. But so I think as villages go, we're still very fortunate to have two pubs.
Yes,
as we do at the moment, particularly the Red Lion and the Blewbury, which used to be the Barley Mow, and then there was the Load of Mischief that shut, and then there was the Blewbury Inn, which was on the main road that was until quite recently were open. But
as I say, we always use the Red Lion, and though I do something in the Barley Mow, not the Barley Mow, the one you mentioned going down the street.
The Blewbury Inn, or the Load of Mischief.
The Load of Mischief, yeah, that's right. And I can't remember what I did there, which was, good Lord.
Was that?
You're bringing back more memories than I have.
Well, that would have been a stop on the walk, wouldn't it? At some point, wouldn't it?
Yeah,
the original one, yeah.
Yes, the Blewbury Walk was a famous event. One was always there with it.
Yeah, indeed.
And the fun we had anyway, when talking about characters, Tony Loy, of course. I mean, he was amazing. He's a great comic, great fun-loving bloke, and he did some great things, of course. He did a pantomime once where it was in the early days, and I'm just trying to think. It was completely Tony's thing, He was, I was one of the acts because it was forget what it was called now, but anyway, he dressed me up as a Chinaman. Chinaman.
Yeah.
Nothing to do with the play, nothing to do with the pantomime that they were putting on. It was something but no Chinese in it, you see. And I had to start the play by going out front and saying, just before pantomime start, I come here to tell you I not got very good part. They tell me pantomime is a vadding. Too late, I find out they're joking. And so to compensate, they put me in charge of audience applause.
Audience applause.
Applause? Clapping. When I say audience clap, everybody must clap. I practice now. Audience clap. And the audience started, and it was an uproar. It was so funny. I mean, it's the only play or production I've ever been in where the audience is cheering like loud before it starts.
That's good. But it's a good way to set the panto off, isn't it? With a few laughs,
right.
get them ready at the start.
Because
you and Tony were a good old double act, weren't you? Because I remember on the we managed to find the recordings from the Snow Queen, which was broadcast on ITV, I think, in the early 80s. And there's a nice, lovely clip of you and Tony singing along at the start of it. So
yes. Oh, well, we did some fun, great things. Just trying to think of something else we did. Well, Brush Up Your Shakespeare was one, of course, we did.
So that was a production, was it? Or was it just a song?
It was a song in there. That's what came in. It may have been I don't know what it was. But all these things mould into one, whether it was entertainment, nothing to do with a play, but something was put on. Everybody was dreaming up mad things to do, and it was a great time. And I know we did that Brush Up Your Shakespeare, which was very, very enjoyable. And many others. Can't name them all, Matt.
Good. So we've got something else that we talked about. It was the Oscars that were done. Was the
Oscars?
Yeah. Was there an Oscars? There was another production, which was the Blewbury Oscars
Well,
or
the
something?
Oscars were hilarious. I mean, they were just another... Everybody dreamt up mad things to do in the pub and, shows. They were... And what you did, you pretended you were a film, and it was... Oh, I've got so many memories that I can't start. I mean, give me a second, I'll think of something. Bum, bum, bum.
So one of the things that we're working on with the players at the moment is Song for Europe, where you've got these sort of sketches around different countries, and there's sort of a song, and then there's a video skit, and it's sort of held together by presenters. And that's a format I think has been done before around the Oscars. Yeah. So maybe you could tell us a bit about those.
I don't know whether it would be classed as an Oscar, Matt, but I was involved in the first Song for Europe.
Oh, yes.
And I think what happened, it was typical stupidity, but we had a map of Europe on the background of the stage. Behind it was voiced with a torch. I would announce Belgium. From the front, I'd have stick and I'd point to, and here we have Belgium. I'd put the Belgium, and of course the light would be anywhere else but Belgium, And you would, so this went on, and this was a laugh, and then we did. Then eventually the song was done, and we went on and did the same thing again. It was all stupid, but it was all a laugh, That was just jokes, and so I don't think it would really be classed as an Oscar. The Oscars were specifically a film. Rejigged for humour.
Yeah.
And some of them were absolutely marvellous.
One of them was Casablanca, wasn't it, that you did?
Sabakwa.
Sabakwa?
Yeah. They were all in swimming gear, and it was just mad coming on stage with flippers on, and it was just mad. The stupidity. What on earth has it got to do with anything? That it was just hilarious. As I say, an Eastie as a woman was... I can't see you just laugh when he went on stage, not what he did. He made so many mistakes. He was absolutely wonderful.
Because Ron being one of the acclaimed sort of artists from Blewbury, of course, Roy was a terrific artist as well, wasn't he? So Roy was involved in the Players as well, wasn't he?
Yes, not as much. It was at the beginning, but he felt, I don't know, but anyway, he didn't do much after the start of the Players. He did one or two sets, and he did one of the operas, I think, sets as well. Very, very good. Operas were another thing we got to talk to mention. There were 5 magnificent operas, including the first one was, what was the first one called? It was Richard Blackford.
Yes, of course, yeah.
And sorry, I can't remember it.
We'll come back to that one, because of course the Snow Queen was
Gawain and the Green Knight.
Ah, yes.
That was the first opera. That was composed by Richard Blackford, and tremendous. That was commissioned by the village and by our own Richard Blackford. He composed it.
And that was performed. Was that performed in the Orchard Dean?
No, the church.
In the church.
Yes, St Michael's. And all the operas were in the church. And they weren't funny. They were very good.
Yeah,
they were serious music, and very good. What else are we talking about? Oscars? You want to go back?
Yeah, let's go back to the Oscars.
So I'm supposed to be talking about.
So we were talking about sort of Casablanca being one of the films. So what other films were sort of sent up? So one of them was Death in Venice, that Tony was also involved in. So yeah, could you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, that skit was hilarious, like they all were. Use that word a lot. But what happened was, Death in Venice starts with Ron in a gondola being driven in across the back of the stage. And of course he does this marvellously. He gets out, and of course, because he's in a canal, he shakes his feet dry, and that sort of thing just killed me, Shakes his feet dry and gets down, and then eventually gets sat down in a seat which was already there. And then on comes an elegant lady with a little boy, played by Tony Loy. The composer is startled by the sight of this little boy and immediately falls in love with him, really. And eventually, Tony goes off with his mother, comes on again the other side, carrying a deck chair. And if you've ever seen anybody get into trouble putting a deck chair up, you should see Tony Loy. I mean, it was hilarious, He had it around his neck and it was around his feet were all caught up in it. And he ends up struggling to get out. He locked himself into this deck chair. And Ron gets out of his chair and hurries down to help him. And then he does, he helps him get out, you see, and he was really... And as he gets out and lets him free, goes to sort of say something to the boy, and the boy just shrugs his shoulder on Tony. Off he goes, leaves on standing, just won't have anything to do with it. It was absolutely hilarious. I keep using hilarious, I can't think of a better word, really. But that was the show. And,
well, from the stuff I've seen from the video archive, you can see that Tony was a very good sort of physical comic actor. Terrific at that.
Absolutely.
Because he was involved, like you were, in a lot of the other summer productions as well. So
One, it was in most things, like I was, some form or other.
We talked about that, like hot summer of '76 and the production then. What other sort of productions kind of stand out for you over the years? Because you've been involved in so many, there must be.
Yeah, I mean, well, personally, there was an interesting thing. We did The Visit at the Corn Exchange in Wallingford.
Oh yes, that was one of the few that was away from, yes.
Yeah, it was the first time, so it was interesting from that point of view. And I think it was Erica directed it. I was playing it, and that was quite an interesting, deviation. To be actually on a stage set properly for a play, rather than an open scene all in the village hall, which was a temporary scene. And so yes, that was quite good. It went down very well.
From a personal perspective, do you prefer? How do you feel about Shakespeare versus other productions? Do you have a preference on those, I suppose?
Well, the first 10 plays we did was Shakespeare. And I was in all of them except one, I think.
Because you played Petruchio as well, didn't you? In Taming the Shrew.
Yes, that was with Meter Wiggins, I think. Yes. And there were 10 Shakespeare plays off the top from the time we started. And I was in all of them except one. And that was Henry V. And it was the night I think it was one night was rain. And rather than cancel it, the decision was made to put it on in the village hall. Just one performance. It wasn't a success. And I think the mood afterwards was never again.
Yep. I think that remains the policy to this day.
And also, while I was a trustee, I let a play go on that was being rained on. And I got in a bit of trouble with lighting. The people saying, well, it's all very well for you, but all these electrical switches in the rain. And so I got in a bit of trouble with letting that play on, but there was no ways it was worth stopping.
Well, we're usually quite lucky with the weather, with the summer productions, but you're always vulnerable at that time of year.
Like this year. But I saw it twice this year, and one in the rain on the Saturday afternoon, and enjoyed it just as much.
Yeah, it wasn't too bad. I remember that production, of course, and
it got wet in the evening, though, didn't it? Pretty wet.
Yeah, some of them did, but we got. I think when you get a full complement of shows out, and it provided it's not an absolute downpour, and it's, I suppose, either dangerous for the actors or deeply unpleasant for the audience. Then you put them on if you possibly can, but. I can see why the decision to move Henry V to the village hall was not repeated, because the logistical challenge of that is significant.
Absolutely, yeah. It was almost an Oscar. By the time we got
warranted an Oscar in its own right, perhaps.
Yeah.
Outstanding contribution.
I wasn't in it, so that was the first one I wasn't in, the Henry V. But then afterwards we started off on a series of. Was it Lark Rise was the first one?
Yeah, there's Lark Cries was done, wasn't it? That was done in, because that's one that the players have done twice, I think. Lark Cries was done recently,
Was it?
But it was also done, back in the before. I think a number of productions the Blewbury Players have done twice.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
very good. Well, maybe let's wrap it up there.
Okay.
Prez, thank you so much for sharing your story and talking to me today. Prez Wells, thank you very much.
Thank you, Matt.